Show number 351 for February 28th. This is the last day of February 2010, which is
the year we make contact.
Thank you very much. Hi there, my name's Larry Herb, Xbox Live's Major Nelson, and the voice you just heard is
Stepton.
Hello there. Battlefield Bad Company 2, the sequel to the obviously the original, is coming out very soon. It's coming out March 2nd in North America, March 4th in Europe, and I've got some of my good friends on the line from DICE, the development house across the pond over there. Gentlemen, welcome. I have Patrick and Andreas. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we're excited to have the release. I know you guys have had the demo out for quite some time, and you're getting geared up for the release of Bad Company 2. Tell us what we can expect at a high level in Bad Company 2, and then I'm going to start to drill in on some questions because I got a ton of questions from the community to ask you.
So, looking at the game from a very high level, it's a sequel to Battlefield Bad Company 1, of course, that's the name. But more importantly, it's a Battlefield game. We actually, looked back at our roots, trying to make sure that we, cover everything that was great in our previous titles, but also make sure that you introduce everything that is new and cool, getting all the new technology behind the destruction, getting all the new and cool features that we developed for the Battlefield Bad Company franchise. Then take that back not only to the consoles but also to the PC. So our focus has been to build the best Battlefield game ever produced.
You talked about making it true to Battlefield. What are some of the hallmarks of the Battlefield franchise in your mind? Like when you were designing Battlefield Bad Company 2, you kind of went up and said, okay, we have to have these 1, 2, 3, or however many things. What in your mind is the designers make that up?
I think the hallmark features that creates a Battlefield game is of course the sandbox gameplay, and it's based around the rock paper scissors theory, where there's always a way to counter the opponent. On top of that, you have the vehicles that kind of counter the whole infantry experience. That gives you this big, wide open battlefield where you have all the variation and all the options that you can ever dream of. We always get this, people telling us, you couldn't believe what just happened when I had this, Battlefield session. I did this crazy thing, and then this crazy thing happened on top of it. And those things, we even call them Battlefield moments because they are more or less unique to the Battlefield experience. So in general, to create a Battlefield game, you need to have all these ingredients of sandbox gameplay, rock, paper, scissors, need vehicles, need infantry, and now in Bad Company 1 and 2 we're added another layer that is the destruction that actually gives you another angle and another dimension to the gameplay, which creates a completely new way of playing games.
Yeah,
I would also like to add.
I want to talk. I'm sorry. I want to talk a little bit about that because you talked about the destruction. You guys have this fantastic engine, the Frostbite engine. And, I mean, in addition to the gameplay and the single player, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's almost like the game engine itself is a star of the game because things happen in this game, this destructibility that you just talked about, that kind of change the way you need to think about playing games. Tell me a little bit about Destruction 2.0 and what that means.
It's actually something that is quite unique. It's a different way of thinking about games because you're giving a lot of control back to the players. You're playing this game, you have someone hiding behind a wall, you don't have to go around it, you can actually blow your way through it. So it's actually a quite a dangerous thing that we're giving to the player, but we've done it in Bad Company 1, we're doing it now again even better in Bad Company 2 with the possibility to take down full buildings and also chip away small pieces from, for instance, covers and different objects in the environment. So what you're doing is you give this strategic choice to the player. Not only how should I play this map, how should I, which path should I take through the map, but also adding the ability to change the battlefield, not only to your advantage, but also changing it for the enemy. So, taking down a full building not only removes the ability for the opponent to actually hide, but it also takes away that from your own gameplay. Your team will actually lose something by removing a cover. So a game session will never look the same again, because it will always play out in a different ways, both from a strategic standpoint, but also from a, how covers are placed and where you could hide, or different paths through the environment. So 2 game sessions will never be the same.
When you look at the game, you talked about it's on consoles and it's also available for Windows for PC. What are some of the design decisions that you have to make in terms of how the two are different or separate in terms of a control and interface? Is that something that you looked at, and if so, how did you address it?
First of all, we've been building PC Battlefield games for many years, so we kind of know the platform, we know what the benefits are, and of course the limitations of the platform. Building Bad Company 1 for the consoles taught us a lot about those platforms as well. So by combining them into one, and also getting a more and more mature audience, the difference is not that big anymore. It's actually more or less the same audience, but there are some more hardcore features that we present to the PC audience. And also making sure that the same accessibility you have on the console is actually available for the PC audience as well. So, the difference is not that big anymore. It used to be bigger, and now it's not as big. But the differences that still are around, we take those very seriously, and make sure that we have a specific team that Andreas is running that only focuses on the PC specific features.
Andreas, can you tell me about some of those PC-specific features?
I mean, the key here is to make sure that first of all, it is the same game, but with some 3 SKUs. So what we do for the PC is to make sure that the experience, not the complete game is a different game, it's that the experience feels good on the PC. So that is going over all the weapons and the vehicles to make sure they feel good to handle with the mouse and keyboard. As well as we add different types of support to support the PC player on a technical standpoint. First of all, we can do more graphical plus sides. I mean, we can add different kind of features that enhances the visual look, as well as catering for those who doesn't have the high-end machines. So we have to also help them to make sure they can tweak as much as possible. And then for the PC as well, we have the possibility to add more players to the game. And if you play both games, you're going to see there is quite an interesting difference in how, even if it's fast and it's awesome flowing on console, it's slightly different on PC, which makes it a completely different experience.
When you go out into the community and there's the PC gamers and the console gamers, I mean, they get into religious debates about keyboard mouse versus controller. What's it like inside the DICE studios? I mean, are the PC guys on one side of the building and the console guys on the other? I mean, how do you reconcile that? And how do they kind of interact?
In general, this is not a problem. We have a lot of people working at the studio that plays, of course, console, and of course another group of people playing PC. But most of those people actually play both platforms. So like I said before, the gap between the PC and the console audience is actually getting smaller and smaller because of the consoles getting more and more powerful, matching the power of a PC. Like you said, there's a quite genuine difference between the input devices. PC has a mouse and keyboard, and then you have the actual controllers, the pads for the consoles. Those things, we do everything we can to get as close as possible as an experience. The key to the success is to realize that there are differences. We don't want to make the PC players feel like this is a console port. On the other hand, you don't want the console players to feel like, oh, this is a complicated game and I can't use my favorite console pad to play this game. So of course we have experts in each area when it comes to controls that caters for each individual platform. So in general, there's not a debate within the studio on which is better. It's more of a focus on how can we make the experience as good as possible for each individual platform.
I want to turn to the story now. Last we saw that Bad Company, in the first game, Bad Company was driving off with a truck full of gold, and they were pretty much going to be happy and set for life. So without giving any spoilers, what happens, and how do they end up back here?
Well, without giving away any spoilers, you've learned to know the characters in Bad Company. You know who they are. You know how they behave. I guess it's not too hard to see them kind of not end up in a good spot after what they did in Bad Company 1. So again, we put them in new and interesting situations based on their personalities and based on who they are. But this time around, we actually tried to put them in even more dangerous situations. And I think that's the biggest difference. The game is a bit more serious, it's a bit darker, and even if it's the same characters, we put them in situations that forces them to act in a different way. So I think that the people who loved the characters in Bad Company 1 will definitely see them coming back again. Same sense of humor, the same kind of personalities that we saw in the first game, but we put them in situations that you have never seen them in before.
So let's focus on what everybody wants to talk about, or what are some of the new vehicles and weapons that we've got in the game this time around?
This is something that we find very dear to us, because Battlefield is all about the weapon and vehicles, and we have a lot of people in the office that love these kind of things. So we have experts in all areas. An example of what's new in these areas is on the vehicle side, is that we try to broaden the spectrum of kind of the vehicle park. So in one end of the spectrum, we added the quad bikes, for instance, which is a very small and nimble vehicle that is adding speed and agility to the vehicle park. So you can easily get to an objective or to any position on the map very quickly, bringing a friend with you. But then on the other hand, on the weak spots are that this vehicle is very, very sensitive to gunfire. So it's quite easy for anyone that has a bigger weapon to take this vehicle out. On the other end of the spectrum, we have, for instance, the Black Hawk helicopter, which can transport a full squad. You can take a full squad from one end of the map to another, and on top of that, you have two miniguns on either side of it, which then starts to rain bullets down on the battlefield. So that's a quite big and evil adversary on the battlefield. Again, you can counter it in many different ways. We have loads of both vehicles and weapons that can take down this Black Hawk helicopter. So we try to broaden the spectrum of both the vehicles and the weapons to make sure that you get a wider experience.
One of the I was asking the community if they had any questions for you, and of course I got hundreds and hundreds, but one of the common ones was, is there a tutorial for flying the helicopter? Because we've all seen that guy get in the helicopter and then just crash it right into a vehicle. Can you give us some tips for jumping into the Black Hawk?
I think people are a bit tensed when it comes to helicopters. Helicopters in games in general are quite hard to fly. We spent a lot of time making sure that we had the right balance on our helicopters in the game. I think it's a heritage of helicopters are hard to fly. Therefore, I kind of aggressively overcompensate for whatever I do when I get into a helicopter. If people just can relax when they get in the helicopter and try to not compensate, the helicopter will actually auto hover. That's a very important feature for the helicopter, that we said that if you let go of the controls, it should stay. The problem what people do when they fly the helicopter is that they try too hard to compensate for anything that happens. There is not a tutorial in the game right now on how to fly the helicopter, but I just recommend to people to just don't try too hard when you get into helicopter the first time. Take it smooth. If you find it hard to fly, just release the controls, and it will stabilize sooner or later. Unless, of course, you're already on a kamikaze run towards the ground. But in general, the helicopter is quite how should I put it? It's kind of noob safe unless you try too hard to crash it.
That's good to know.
So I'm not calling people who crashes helicopter noobs. Just to make that clear, it's just that I think the heritage of hard to fly helicopters is kind of getting back at us right now. People who just take it calm and not overcompensate too much, and they will find it quite easy to fly the helicopters, actually.
Patrick, I wanted to just take a step aside for a moment. We were talking about Battlefield Bad Company 2, which is coming out in the first week of March in many areas. But let's step back a little bit. Were you surprised over the past year about Battlefield 1943, an Xbox Live Arcade game that's digital distributed? I mean, the success of that game is it's been extraordinary.
Yeah, I know. Personally, I have not been too much involved in that project from a management perspective. So I can't vouch for that team and how the team reacts to the success. Just looking at a studio kind of perspective on that title, we were, of course, quite sure that if we only could get people to pick the game up and play it, we knew that people would like it. What we didn't expect was that many people would like it. So we had, of course, our we played it a lot in-house. We knew that the success of Battlefield 1942, came from something, and just giving it a new twist and making it more accessible to the broader audience was, on paper, the way to go forward. Of course, like you said, it was a huge success. This was something that we did not anticipate, and of course, we learned a lot on that process. That consumers on consoles actually get it. We don't have to, try to, we still thought that, it's a Battlefield game, 942 is a hardcore game and it might be hard to grasp, but people picked it up and played it in more or less exactly the same way we at the studio played it. So we just found it very, very interesting to see that people are not, consumers aren't stupid. We know that if people pick these games up, they will love them. So that's a good and very, a lesson learned from our side, that don't underestimate, first of all, the power of the consumers, but also don't underestimate what Battlefield is all about.
Tell me, obviously we talked about the single player and what's going on there, but the multiplayer is such a big part of it. Tell me what kind of maps we can expect in the multiplayer, and also tell me a little bit about the day one downloadable content.
Looking at how the maps are designed in the game is of course important. All Battlefield games has a focus on creating balanced maps that can be played over and over and over again. There's a lot of things going on in the background that players might not pick up on, but they will notice after playing these maps after maybe 10, 20, 100 times that they not only look very different, which is of course something that we found very important, but they also play very different from a strategic standpoint. We have this focus on team play that we're really put a lot of effort into building into the core base of the Battlefield game, making sure it's easier to play as a squad, for instance, and giving squad orders and handing out supportive actions. So if you play this game for the first time and you play Lone Wolf, you will see that the game plays in one way. But after a couple of times, you will start to play as a team, as a squad, and you will notice how these maps actually play completely different from a team perspective. And I think that's something that's very interesting. Not only from us, of course, we have a design that we hope that people pick up on, but when you see people actually playing it, when you're done with it, you can see that people not only pick up on what you design, but also evolve that further. So they find new ways of playing the game that we couldn't have designed. And I think that's the coolest thing with the maps for Bad Company 2 is that they play quite differently. It's the same game-based gameplay, but just changing the map layouts and changing some of the flows through the map, people start to play the game in completely different ways, and that's very interesting. On top of that, we have the game modes that, of course, changes the way you play the game. But just changing a map layout will, completely change the way people play the game. On the topic of the maps that you can get access to day one, I think the cool thing with those is that those are maps that will further add to the mix. It's not something we just latched on and thought that, let's build another map to add a number. But it's actually maps that add to the spectrum of what Battlefield is. So I think people will pick that up quite fast after launch, that these maps actually, they're not just a number. It's something that changes the way you play the game.
And as we were talking about, is that there's actually some content that's available on the day one when you come home and pop the disc in, some new maps, correct?
Mm-hmm, that is correct.
Can you tell us?
And those maps.
Tell us a little bit about the maps there, if you would.
So I can. You'll get two new maps day one. One of them is quite different actually, and now I want to point that out, that there's a night map that we haven't had in the Battlefield game before. So it gives you a completely different visual approach to the actual gameplay. The other map looks more traditional, but the flow through that is quite different as well. So it will change the way that you see the game. And looking at for instance a night map, you might think it's just a visual treatment, but we don't do the visuals just as one part of the game. It's a part of the full experience. So I think people will find those maps quite interesting and to quality as well, of course.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to tell us a little bit about Battlefield Bad Company 2, both the single player, a lot of the characters. In fact, all the characters are back that you remember from the first game, and then of course the deep and involved multiplayer. Before I let you go, can you guys tell me a little bit about the demo? The demo was on Xbox Live. Tell me about some of the data that you collected there, and what some of the takeaways that you took from the demo and that was released.
First of all, we had a beta out on PlayStation 3 back in the autumn, which gave us a lot of feedback on balancing issues, win-lose balances, a lot of small stuff that we actually went in and changed in the game. So the demo that came out had all of these changes in. Of course, there are a lot of changes that are not in the demo that is in the full game. So there's still stuff that are changed in the demo, but in general, the thing that we're most proud of when you look at the demos is that the balancing that we've been trying so hard to achieve actually works. We look at the numbers not only from what kit is the most powerful or most beneficial, where you see a more or less 25% split between all the kits, but also looking at the rush game mode, which is an objective-based progressive game mode. You can see that the win-lose conditions for both teams is close to 50-50, and that is something that we're almost shocked about, because it's on paper that's almost impossible to achieve. But apparently, we've done our homework, so the game, at least looking at the numbers, works really, really good. But the most important thing is when you see people's reactions on the forums, they don't talk about the balance or those things first. They talk about the experience. They pick up on the Battlefield experience, on using, different tactics, different ways, different vehicles, different weapons. They use all the kits, they use all the items in the kits to achieve the things that we have been trying to design for them for all these years. And that just makes us very happy. It's almost fascinating to see that all the complexity of a game like this, in the end, kind of works out. People will play the game in the ways that you have designed it for, but we will also find new ways that the game won't break. The game holds up. People will find countermeasures to whatever tactics that anyone can come up with, and that just makes it magic.
Listen, my friends, thanks so much. Have a fantastic weekend, and we're looking forward to the release of Battlefield Bad Company 2. It's coming out March 2nd in North America and March 4th in Europe and so forth. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank
you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.